I hope you'll find the core value hidden within this story. My name is Evelyn Carter, 66 years old, a widow for 3 years. I used to be a high school math teacher in Bloomington, Indiana, the kind of teacher who could calculate the pause between 2 breaths. Now I live alone in a small brick house on the edge of town. I grow tomatoes in the back garden, read old library books, and keep everything in order the way I always have. My husband Henry died of a stroke during an evening class. He was the careful type, the kind of man who kept grocery receipts from the 1980s. The only thing I kept after he was gone was his Rolex Submariner, the watch he wore every day for 43 years. Each morning I still wound it as if doing so could keep him close. My son sold my husband's Rolex and told me to stop whining. I remember that Friday night vividly, the smell of roasted chicken in the kitchen, the hum of the TV, and Brittany, my daughter-in-law, scrolling through her phone, laughing about their upcoming trip to Cancun to de-stress. "You know, Mom," she said, raising her glass of white wine, "we work so hard all year. Everyone deserves a little luxury." Jacob, my son, barely looked up from the football game. I tried to sound casual. "So how'd you manage that flights aren't cheap this time of year?" Brittany smirked. Oh, Jacob's smart with money. Her tone was sugary, but her eyes flickered something off. After dinner, while cleaning up, I noticed the glass cabinet door slightly open. I always kept it locked. Inside were only a few things: our wedding photos, Henry's medals, and that Rolex. The box was empty. The watch was gone. I walked back to the living room. "Jacob, did you take your father's watch?" He didn't look up. "Which one?" "The Rolex. The one he wore every day." Brittany looked over her glass of wine. "Oh, that old thing. I thought you said you sold it." My stomach dropped. "Sold it?" Jacob finally looked at me, clearly irritated. "I needed the money for the trip, Mom. It was just an old watch." I had to grip the back of the chair to keep my hands from shaking. "You sold your father's watch for plane tickets." He sighed as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "Mom, come on. Don't make this a big deal. You've got to stop clinging to junk that doesn't mean anything anymore." The room shrank around me. The sounds of TV chatter and clinking glasses merged into a dull roar. I forced a thin smile, brittle as glass. "Interesting. You sold your father's time to buy your own vacation." Brittany laughed softly. "Oh, Mom, you always make everything sound like a philosophy lesson. We only live once. You should learn to relax." I looked at her perfect hair. Perfect nails, a pearl necklace that caught the flicker of the TV light. Henry had spent his life believing honesty was the only true currency. Now our son had traded it for airline miles. When they left, the house fell silent. I stood in the kitchen under the dim yellow light. On the table sat a half-empty cup of Earl Grey tea gone cold. The steam had long vanished, the tea leaves floating like bits of memory. I didn't cry. I thought grief would come with tears, but instead it came as silence and the sound of the wall clock ticking steadily. Tick-tock, tick-tock. I opened Henry's old notebook. He used to jot down recipes, repair notes, and little sayings. Flipping through, I found one line written years ago. "If anything happens, remember the watch keeps more than time." It used to make me laugh. Now it made me tremble. The next morning followed the same routine: coffee curtains and the sight of neighbors walking their dogs. Everything was ordinary until I noticed a small slip of paper on the floor near the cabinet. A pawn shop receipt. The name read, Patriot Pawn, East Side. I drove back to Patriot Pawn, the little shop tucked between a laundromat and an auto repair garage on the east side of town. The air smelled faintly of rain and old gasoline. The same faded sign hung above the door, the paint peeling at the corners. Inside, a radio hummed low with country music and the scent of strong coffee mixed with metal and dust. Behind the counter stood a man I hadn't met the night before. He was in his mid-50s, heavy-set, but not unkind, with weathered hands and laugh lines that suggested he'd seen plenty of life. A tattoo peeked from under the rolled sleeve of his flannel shirt. "Morning," he said, looking up from a stack of receipts. "You must be Mrs. Carter, Leo Ramirez." He extended a calloused hand. His handshake was firm, the kind of grip that belonged to someone who'd once done real work, maybe construction or the military. I nodded. You already know who I am." He smiled slightly. Word travels fast when somebody walks in asking about a Rolex. It's not every day a watch like that shows up here, especially one sold by his own son. The words hit harder than I expected. I swallowed. "So, you know about that." Leo leaned on the counter, studying me with eyes that held both humor and pity. "Yeah. That watch had a story written all over it. Your son told me he was selling it to help his mom out. I've heard a lot of lines in this business, but that one almost made me laugh. I felt heat rush to my face. He said, 'What, don't take it personally,'" Leo added quickly, raising both palms. "People lie to pawnbrokers the way they lie to priests. I stopped taking it to heart years ago." He reached for a mug and poured coffee from an old metal pot. "You drink coffee, Mrs. Carter?" I hesitated. "Sure." He handed me a mug. I took one sip and nearly choked. It was so bitter it could strip paint. Leo noticed immediately. Too strong, I coughed once, then laughed. "Let's just say I've had smoother conversations and smoother coffee." He grinned, obviously relieved that I wasn't the type to take offense. "Sorry about that. I was a Marine, not a barista." That small moment, his awkward attempt at kindness, eased something in my chest. Leo leaned back on the counter. "Listen about that Rolex, it's already gone. Some guy came in early yesterday, paid cash, no questions asked. But he stopped searching my face. Maybe you should sit down for this part." I did. When we were cleaning it up before putting it on display, my assistant noticed something odd. The back panel was heavier than usual. When we opened it, we found a hidden compartment. Pretty good craftsmanship, definitely not factory made. Looked like a jeweler or a watchmaker had customized it. My breath caught. And what was inside? He reached under the counter and brought out a small yellow envelope, sealed but worn at the edges. This. We figured whoever owned the watch might want it back. He slid it toward me carefully as if it were a live grenade. I picked it up, fingers trembling slightly. It was light, too light for something that had survived decades of wear. "Did you read it?" I asked. Leo shook his head. "Ma'am, I may be a pawnshop owner, but I'm not a thief. I don't open things that don't belong to me." "Thank you," I said softly. He shrugged. "Besides, my mother would haunt me if I did. She used to tell me, 'Leo Karma's got a better memory than you do.'" That made me smile. Sounds like a wise woman. He poured himself another cup of that dreadful coffee and took a sip without flinching. "So he said that son of yours, he really didn't tell you he was selling it?" "No," I said quietly. "He didn't tell me a lot of things." Leo nodded slowly, as if he understood more than he was letting on. "Families can be messy. I see it every day in here. People selling their grandmother's wedding rings, their dad's tools, even their kids' trophies. Sometimes for rent, sometimes for pride. But every now and then—" He gestured toward the envelope. "Every now and then, something in here surprises you." The way he said it, gentle but certain, sent a strange chill down my spine. I set the mug aside and ran a finger along the flap of the envelope. It felt slightly waxy, like it had been sealed years ago. I was suddenly afraid to open it, afraid of what I might find or what I might lose. "Do you think whoever bought the watch knows about this?" I asked. Leo frowned. "Hard to say. The guy didn't seem like a collector, more like someone on a mission. Tall, mid-40s, cash in hand, didn't even haggle. Did he leave a name?" He shook his head. "Paid cash, no ID. Happens all the time. But if he knew about that compartment, he sure hid it well." For a moment, we both just stood there in the hum of the fluorescent lights, listening to the low twang of a country song about lost time. Then Leo broke the silence. "Whatever's in that envelope, Mrs. Carter, maybe your husband wanted you to find it, not your son." I looked up sharply. "Why would you say that?" He smiled faintly. "Because the watch was built to hide something, not lose it. And a man who hides something that carefully, he wasn't running from strangers. He was protecting someone." That sentence hung in the air between us, heavy and warm like the smell of his bitter coffee. I nodded slowly, still staring at the envelope. "You really think so? I don't just think so," he said. "I know the look of a soldier's secret. Your husband built that watch like a vault. Maybe not for money, maybe for love." I didn't answer. I just held the envelope against my chest. Leo cleared his throat. "I'll keep an ear out for that buyer in case he shows up again. People like him always circle back. In the meantime—" He paused, then handed me a small business card. On it was written, "Leo Ramirez, owner, Patriot Pawn." On the back, a handwritten line, "If you ever need someone to fix more than a watch, call me." I slipped it into my purse. "Thank you, Mr. Ramirez." "Leo," he corrected with a grin. "Only my ex-wife calls me Mr. Ramirez." That made me laugh, a soft surprise sound I hadn't heard from myself in months. I left the pawn shop and stepped into the cool afternoon light, the envelope clutched tightly in my hand. The sky above was pale and wide, the kind of sky Henry used to say looked like a clean slate. Sitting in the car, I stared at the envelope for a long time before finally opening it. Inside was a single piece of folded paper, yellowed with age. The handwriting was unmistakably Henry's precise, patient, careful. On it was a string of letters and numbers, AR 1984, CH0923EC. I had no idea what it meant, but the moment I saw it, I felt something shift inside me, a quiet pulse of recognition, like a forgotten song. Henry once told me that everything he ever built, he built to last. Maybe this was his way of keeping time from ending. As I started the engine, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. For the first time in a long while, my eyes didn't look tired. They looked awake. And somewhere between the ticking of the dashboard clock and the beating of my heart, I knew this wasn't just about a watch anymore. It was about what the watch had been protecting all along. The drive home from the pawn shop was quiet except for the rhythmic clicking of the turn signal and the whisper of tires against wet pavement. On the passenger seat sat the yellow envelope, creased thin, yet unbearably heavy. When I arrived home, I placed it on the kitchen table beside my own wristwatch, a cheap quartz I'd bought years ago when Henry's Rolex felt too painful to wear. The two watches looked like they came from different worlds, mine plastic and ordinary, his metal and immortal. The slip of paper with its strange symbols lay between them, AR 1984, CHE923EC. I stared at it for a long time, tracing the letters with my fingertip. It looked like a bank code or an account reference. Henry had worked as an accountant before becoming a community consultant. He loved precision. If anyone could hide a secret inside numbers, it was him. So I made coffee, sat down at Henry's old laptop, and began to test my theory. I typed Arrow Ridge Bank into the search bar. It was one of the smaller regional banks in Chicago, mostly used by engineers and local charities. Henry used to donate to their community programs every December. The first part of the code, AR 1984, felt like more than coincidence. The website asked for a client ID. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I entered the string exactly as written, AR 1984 923EC. The cursor blinked twice. Then the screen flashed red, access denied, invalid credentials. I sighed, leaning back. Maybe I was chasing ghosts, but something about the code kept pulling at me, ARCHEC. Henry's handwriting was too deliberate to be random. I glanced at the photo of us on the mantel, our anniversary trip in 1984 Chicago skyline behind us, his arm around my shoulders. He'd written the date on the back of the photo, September 23, 1984, Evelyn's choice. CH could stand for Chicago. 0923 was September 23rd. And EC, those were my initials. My pulse quickened. I tried again, this time splitting the code differently. AR 1984, CH0923, EC. The login box blinked, then opened a secondary prompt, Enter sub-account key. I froze. My heart beat in my ears. It was working. But what key? I thought of Henry's notes. The way he always reused old passwords built around anniversaries, favorite songs, or our dog's name. I tried Whiskey 74, the name of our old golden retriever. Denied. Then Henry upon Evelyn, denied. Finally, I tried our wedding date 0715, and the screen flickered again. A new message appeared. Sub-account verified, access limited. And then like an old door creaking open, a page loaded black text over a white background. Arrow Ridge Bank, client H. Carter deceased, linked sub-account, E. Carter balance, $850,042. I stared at the number until it blurred. $850,000. Money that wasn't supposed to exist. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. The next line was even stranger. Deposits from multiple external sources, reference codes unknown. My hands were trembling. The dates on the deposits ranged back 10 years, small amounts. At first, a few thousand here and there, but then larger sums, $50,000, $120,000, $200,000 each, labeled simply allocation transfer. Allocation to what I printed the statement, heart-pounding. It wasn't just the money, it was the secrecy. Henry was meticulous, honest to a fault. He balanced every cent in our household ledger. There was no way he would hide this without a reason, unless he'd been protecting something or someone. By mid-afternoon, the house felt too quiet, too aware of my thoughts. The air smelled of coffee gone cold and fear. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Franklin Shaw, one of Henry's oldest friends. Franklin had worked with Henry decades ago at a manufacturing plant before moving into watch engineering. The last time I'd seen him was at Henry's funeral, standing by the back pew, crying quietly behind his glasses. The phone rang twice. "Shaw Engineering," a voice answered. "Franklin, it's Evelyn Carter." There was a pause, then a chuckle. "Well, I'll be damned." "Evelyn, you still sound the same. What's got you calling an old rusted man like me?" I found something I said, something Henry left behind, a code inside his watch. He whistled softly. Inside his watch, that old Rolex, yes. The one Jacob sold. Jacob sold it. He exhaled sharply. Christ, Evelyn. That boy never learned respect. I forced a weak smile even though he couldn't see it. That's not the half of it. The code led me to a bank account. "Let me guess." Franklin said, tone suddenly serious. "Arrow Ridge Bank." I froze. "How did you know?" He laughed dryly. "Henry used to volunteer at their community branch every Christmas. He helped me set up a fund for factory widows. AR stands for Arrow Ridge. 1984 was the year he first donated. I told him once it'd make a great password. My heart skipped. So this isn't random, not even close. Henry had a habit of layering meaning into everything. CH could be Chicago, where the fund was registered, and EC, well, that's you. I ran a hand over my face. There's money in it, Franklin. A lot of money. $850,000. The line went silent. Then Franklin spoke quieter. Say that again. 850,000 from multiple sources. The transactions don't match any of our accounts. Evelyn, he said slowly. Henry was generous, but he didn't have that kind of wealth. Not from teaching, not from consulting. You're saying someone's been depositing funds into a hidden account under your name. Yes. Franklin inhaled sharply. Then listen carefully. Don't log in again from your home network. And don't tell anyone, not Jacob, not Brittany, nobody. If that account's still active, it's being watched. A chill ran down my spine. Watched by who? He hesitated. I don't know. But in my line of work, people don't leave 6 figures unclaimed for no reason. If Henry was involved, he was protecting something much bigger than charity. Do you think he was in trouble? I think he was preparing for it. I looked around the house, the photographs, the worn furniture, the stack of unpaid bills on the counter. Everything suddenly felt fragile, like props in a play that was about to end. Henry's watch hadn't just kept time. It had been a vault, and I had just cracked it open. Franklin, I said softly, what do I do now? He sighed, the sound heavy with old loyalty. First print everything, every document, every statement. Keep them somewhere safe. Then meet me tomorrow morning at my workshop. I'll take a look at what you've got. All right. And Evelyn. Yes. If anyone knows you've accessed that account, he said, his voice suddenly grave, they won't let you stay quiet about it. Whatever Henry stumbled into, it didn't end when he died. I stared at the glowing bank screen one last time before closing the laptop. In the dark reflection of the monitor, my own face looked older, sharper. Someone halfway between grief and defiance. Outside, thunder rolled over the Indiana horizon, low and distant. Somewhere in that sound, I thought I heard Henry's voice again, calm, deliberate, protective. If anything happens, remember the watch keeps more than time. Now I finally understood. The watch hadn't just held a secret, it had held a warning. By the time Jacob and Brittany returned from their tropical escape, the snow in Bloomington had started to melt. I heard the tires of their SUV crunch up the driveway long before the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Brittany breezed in first, tanned and glowing like she'd just been photoshopped by the sun. Jacob followed, dragging 2 oversized suitcases that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Mom Brittany sang, stretching her arms for a hug that never quite reached me. You should have come with us. The ocean was unreal. I swear Cancun is therapy. I stepped aside, motioning them in. I've had enough therapy for one lifetime. She didn't hear the irony, or maybe she did and chose to ignore it. Her voice floated through the living room like a commercial jingle. Look at these photos. Oh my God, Jacob, show her the one with the dolphins. Jacob unlocked his phone, scrolling with the same detached pride I remembered from his teenage years. Yeah, we swam with dolphins, zip-lined 8 at this resort that costs like $600 a night, worth every penny. I bit my tongue. Every penny of my husband's watch, I thought. They dropped onto my couch, Brittany still talking, Jacob half listening, while I quietly gathered the water bills from the counter. The newest one caught my eye. The numbers had doubled since last month. Did you leave the garden hose running while I was gone? I asked casually. Jacob frowned. What? No. Why I waved the bill? Because apparently I'm watering a desert now. He shrugged, uninterested. Maybe a leak. Or maybe someone used my house to fill an inflatable pool, I said, dry as toast. Brittany laughed, thinking it was a joke. Oh, Mom, you're so funny when you're passive-aggressive. You should try stand-up. I smiled thinly. I'll save it for my eulogy. Her laughter faltered for half a second, then she tossed her hair. Anyway, you should consider selling this place. It's way too big for one person. And honestly... She looked around, nose wrinkled. It's kind of old, like vintage in a depressing way. Jacob muttered Brit, but she was on a roll. There's a new condo complex near the lake, fresh, modern, no drafts. You could finally have some peace of mind. I sipped my tea, let the silence hang, then smiled sharp and cold. Peace of mind, I echoed. Dear you should buy a bigger mirror. You might finally see where your soul went. Jacob choked on his coffee. Brittany blinked, unsure whether to laugh or be offended. I was just trying to help, she said stiffly. I know I said setting down my cup. You've always been so generous with advice about what I should sell next. The tension in the room was thick enough to slice with a butter knife. The TV hummed faintly from the background, showing some home renovation show where everything was fixed in 30 minutes. I almost laughed at the irony. Jacob finally broke the silence. Mom, what's going on? You're acting weird. I looked at him carefully. Weird how I don't know. Paranoid. Ever since Dad died, you've been taking care of what's left, I interrupted, which apparently isn't much anymore. He looked away, tapping his phone like he wanted to be anywhere but here. I leaned forward. Tell me something, Jacob. How much do you know about your father's accounts? That got his attention. His head jerked up. What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. Henry's accounts. The ones you never mentioned while selling his watch. Brittany's eyebrows shot up. Wait, are we doing this again? Just a question, I said mildly. You always told me you handled Dad's paperwork after the funeral, remember? So you must have come across something interesting. Jacob's jaw tightened. I didn't handle anything major, just basic forms. Basic forms don't explain the missing deposits, I said. His eyes flickered just a split second, but enough. That flash of recognition you can't fake. I smiled faintly. There it is. You know something. Mom, seriously, he said, standing abruptly. I have no idea what you're talking about. This is getting unhealthy. Unhealthy, I echoed. That's rich. You sold your father's memory for a vacation, and now you're lecturing me about wellness. Brittany crossed her arms. This is exactly why we don't visit more often. You twist everything into some moral crusade. I ignored her. My eyes stayed locked on Jacob. Your father's bank accounts. Did you ever hear the name Arrow Ridge Bank? He hesitated just long enough to confirm it. No, he said, finally too quickly. Never heard of it. The silence stretched loud enough to drown the lies. Funny, I said, voice steady. Because I did, and so did Dad. He stared at me, trying to gauge how much I knew. His fingers fidgeted with his watch, not Henry's, of course, but some shiny smartwatch that probably tracked every heartbeat except the one that mattered. What exactly are you implying? He asked. Nothing, I said sweetly. Just that your father was a man who planned ahead, meticulous, honest, the kind of man who'd never leave things unfinished. Mom. Which makes me wonder, I continued, why someone would go through so much trouble to hide something he left behind. He swallowed hard. The sound filled the quiet room. Mom Brittany cut in sharply. Enough. You're clearly upset, and this conversation is going nowhere. Oh, it's going somewhere, I said softly. Just not the place you expected. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the soft ticking of the wall clock, Henry's old metronome of truth. Then, as if to break the tension, Brittany clapped her hands. You know what, Jacob? Let's take her out tomorrow. Breakfast at that new cafe downtown. Maybe getting out will help clear whatever this is. I smiled too politely. How thoughtful. I'll bring my lawyer. He enjoys breakfast almost as much as honesty. Jacob froze, confusion flickering into panic. Your lawyer. What for? Oh, nothing dramatic, I said lightly. Just making sure I don't accidentally sell a house I still own. Brittany rolled her eyes. You're being ridiculous, maybe I said. Or maybe I finally stopped being naive. Jacob grabbed his coat. We're leaving. Before you go, I added one last thing. If you ever come across an account number with AR 1984 in it, don't touch it. He turned, eyes narrowing. Why? Because it's not yours, I said evenly. And if you try, you'll regret it. The air between us was razor-thin, sharp enough to draw blood. Brittany scoffed. Honestly, Evelyn, sometimes I think you just like drama. Maybe, I said, leaning back in my chair. But this time, dear, I didn't write the script. They stormed out the slam of the front door, rattling the picture frames on the wall. I sat alone again, surrounded by silence and the faint scent of their expensive cologne. On the table, the printed bank statements fluttered slightly in the draft from the door numbers, dates codes, proof of something Henry had buried deep beneath years of ordinary life. I picked up the papers and whispered into the empty room. Comedy or tragedy? Henry, I'll play it to the end. The morning after that tense confrontation with Jacob and Brittany, the house fell into a silence so deep I could hear every tick-tock from the wall clock. Pale sunlight filtered through the curtains, resting on the yellow envelope I hadn't dared to reopen since the day before. I brewed myself a cup of tea, but the scent wasn't comforting anymore. It smelled like memory, like something that had been waiting for me to face it. I pulled the slip of paper from the envelope and laid it on the table. The sequence, AR 1984 CHY 23EC, still glared up at me. But this time, as I turned it over, I saw a faint line of handwriting in Henry's script. In case of danger, use the time we met. I froze. The time we met. A flood of memory washed over me, the sound of train announcements, the screech of wheels on rails, and Henry's nervous voice asking for directions. Chicago, autumn, 1984, 9:23 a.m. I was a 28-year-old secretary late for work, clutching a cup of coffee as I rushed through Union Station. A tall man in a gray coat holding a stack of factory blueprints crashed straight into me. Coffee splashed. Papers flew. I still remember how he knelt down to pick them up one by one, his voice apologetic, unsure. "I'm so sorry. I'm terrible at organizing things, but maybe I can buy you another cup to make up for it." I had laughed. "What about my ruined blouse?" He paused, then grinned sheepishly. "In that case, I might have to marry you to replace it." It was the clumsiest pickup line I'd ever heard, but also the most sincere. We met again the next morning, then the one after that, until 923 became our number, our private symbol of beginnings. Back in the present, I stared at the words on that note. Use the time we met. That time was 09:23 a.m. My hands trembled as I opened Henry's old laptop. The house was filled with the steady sound of the clock tick-tock, each beat syncing with my pulse. I entered the code into the bank portal once more, adding the time at the end, AR 1984, CH0923EC, 0923. The screen flickered twice. Then a new message appeared. Secondary authorization accepted. Loading secure portfolio. I held my breath. The fan of the laptop whirred softly, blending with the rhythm of the clock. Then a new window opened. Arrow Ridge Investment Holdings. Account owner H. Carter. Deceased co-beneficiary E. Carter. Total assets. I couldn't move. $2,347,000. A fortune no one had ever mentioned, hidden in plain sight. Each tab revealed another layer of the truth. Real estate trusts, municipal bonds, private charities. Every line was part of something Henry had built quietly over years, a plan too deliberate to be random. I flipped the note again, his handwriting slanted slightly, still familiar after all these years, in case of danger. And suddenly I understood. Henry had known. He had known there would come a day like this when the people closest to me would turn, when I'd be forced to fight for dignity inside my own home. He hadn't hidden the money to escape. He'd hidden it to protect me. Tears welled silent and heavy. They fell onto the keyboard, blurring the glowing words. A soft ping interrupted the moment. A notification appeared at the top of the screen. Beneficiary status confirmed. New activity detected. I froze. Someone had just tried to access the account. The IP address, Bloomington, local network. My chest tightened. Jacob, of course. I quickly logged out, disconnected the Wi-Fi, and unplugged the router. Before the screen went dark, one last message appeared: unauthorized access attempt. Failed. I exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of the desk. My heart was pounding like a drum. I looked around the house, the faded wedding photos, the old letters Henry had written in the late 80s, his gardening sweater still draped on the chair. Everything was quiet. Only the clock kept counting. Tick, tick, tick. "Henry," I whispered, "you planned for everything, didn't you?" In the dim morning light, the reflection on the laptop screen caught my face, older, steadier, but sharper now. The fear was gone. Only focus remained. I folded the note carefully, slid it inside a leather notebook, and began writing everything I'd learned: the codes, the deposits, the connections. For the first time in months, I felt Henry's presence, not in memory, but in purpose. That afternoon, Franklin called. "Evelyn, I ran a background check on that account." He said, his voice tight. "It's not a charity. Henry used the foundation's name to open a private trust and automatic rollover fund. Someone's been trying to breach it." "I know," I said quietly. "They tried this morning." "Good Lord," he muttered. "He must have foreseen this. Evelyn, you need to be careful. This isn't just money. It's evidence of something Henry didn't want others to find." "I understand," I said calmly. "And I'm going to find out what it is." "Did he leave you anything else?" "Any clue?" Franklin asked. I looked at the folded paper on my desk and smiled faintly. "Just one note." "What does it say?" I whispered almost to myself. "If there's danger, use the time we met." There was a pause on the line. Then Franklin spoke, his voice hushed with awe. "My God." Henry was always 3 steps ahead of everyone who tried to outsmart him. I looked up at the clock, the second hand passing over 9:23. Yes, I said. But this time, I'll be the one to finish what he started. Night fell. I turned off every light except the one glowing from Henry's old clock. Each tick-tock echoed like his heartbeat still living somewhere within these walls. Outside, the wind hissed through the trees, brushing against the metal chime he'd built years ago. In the quiet, I whispered, "Thank you, Henry, for loving me deeply enough to think of the future." Then I closed the notebook, tracing the faded inscription on its cover, written in his hand long ago in 1984. Love keeps time, and truth always finds its hour. The doorbell rang just as the morning light cut through the fog outside. It wasn't the kind of ring you get from neighbors or delivery men. It was firm, deliberate, the kind that belonged to people who came with an agenda. I straightened my cardigan and opened the door. Two figures stood on the porch. The first was a man in his late 40s, crisp navy suit, hair slicked back with too much pomade. His smile was thin, practiced the kind that didn't quite reach the eyes. Beside him stood a young woman in a beige blazer, clutching a leather folder, and wearing an expression halfway between politeness and discomfort. "Mrs. Carter," the man asked. "Yes." He extended a card like a magician, revealing a trick. "Paul Trent Eskens, Estate and Family Law, and this is my associate, Madison Lee." He continued, "We represent your son, Jacob Carter. May we come in?" The words your son carried a chill that the winter air couldn't match. "Of course," I said, stepping aside, "but you'll have to excuse the house. It's not used to suits and ties." They entered, shoes clicking on the old hardwood floor. Madison's eyes darted around the room, the clock, the photos, the open notebook on my desk. Paul Trent moved like he owned the place, or at least thought he soon would. "Please," I said, motioning toward the dining table. "Have a seat, I'll make some tea." In the kitchen, I could hear their hushed voices. "She seems lucid," Madison whispered. Paul replied, "That's what they all seem before they sign." I smiled to myself and stirred the pot. Chamomile. Calming, but not for them. When I returned, I placed the tray between them. The good china, the one Henry used to joke, was too fragile for guests, too pretty for us. So I began sitting opposite them. "How can I help my son's representatives today?" Paul cleared his throat. "Mrs. Carter, your son is concerned about some recent financial activity. He's asked us to assist you in managing your estate. It's all very standard for someone your age, just precautionary." I lifted an eyebrow. "Precautionary against what breathing?" He chuckled awkwardly. No, of course not. Just to ensure your assets are handled properly, to prevent any mistakes of judgment." Madison slid a document across the table, a neatly printed stack with a bold heading in legalese temporary power of attorney, financial authorization. I took my time reading the title, tracing the letters as though they were foreign words. Then I looked up, calm as still water. "So this," I said softly, "would give my son full control over every account, property, and investment under my name. Correct?" Paul's practiced smile faltered. "Technically, yes, but only temporarily. It's a safeguard. You'd still be the owner. Jacob would just have the authority to sign on your behalf to simplify transactions." "Transactions like selling my house?" I asked. "Well, hypothetically," I nodded slowly, then leaned back. "You know, Mr. Trent, I taught mathematics for 30 years. Teenagers who thought they could cheat their way through calculus. I could spot the look the moment they hid something under their paper." He froze. "And right now," I said gently, "you have the same look." The silence that followed could have cracked glass. Madison's pen stopped mid-scribble. The color drained from her face. "I beg your pardon," Paul said, voice tightening. I smiled kindly, the way teachers do before giving bad grades. "Oh, you heard me. I recognize patterns in numbers, in lies in people. You're not here to help me. You're here because Jacob's realized I'm not as gullible as he thought." Paul shifted in his seat. "Mrs. Carter, that's not necessary to deny I finished for him. I already know." The air grew heavy. Somewhere behind me, the old wall clock clicked louder, like it too was holding its breath. Paul attempted to regain control. "Mrs. Carter, please understand this is just a formal precaution. Your son only wants what's best for you." I folded my hands. Then perhaps he should start by asking what that is. He blinked, thrown off rhythm. Madison looked down at her folder, clearly rethinking her career choices. And then right on cue came the comedy relief. My cat Winston chose that exact moment to leap onto the dining table, his tail swishing like a sword. He sniffed around the teacups, eyed the documents, and before I could intervene, planted a perfect paw in the middle of the power of attorney packet. The cup tipped. Chamomile poured across the fine print, soaking through every page like slow, golden honey. "Oh," Madison gasped, scrambling for napkins. Paul jumped up. "Good Lord." I stayed seated, calm as ever. "Oh, don't worry," I said, watching the ink blur. "It's only temporary, right?" Madison bit her lip, trying not to laugh. Paul looked like a man who just lost a chess game he didn't realize had started. "I'll have new copies sent," he said curtly, dabbing at his suit sleeve. "That won't be necessary," I replied. "You see, Mr. Trent, I don't sign papers, I don't write, and I certainly don't hand over my pen to anyone who brings it for me." He collected his briefcase, face tight with irritation. "Mrs. Carter, I must insist that you at least consult with your son before rejecting this arrangement. He's worried about you. Tell Jacob I appreciate the concern," I said evenly. "But if he's truly worried, he can come himself without hiding behind someone else's letterhead." Paul's tone sharpened. "You're making this more difficult than it needs to be." I met his stare head on. "I've survived marriage, widowhood, and high school board meetings. Believe me, Mr. Trent, I can handle difficult." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Winston let out a low, smug row, as if sealing the verdict. Paul exhaled through his nose and turned toward the door. "Madison," he muttered, "let's go." Madison gathered the soggy papers, offered me a quick, apologetic smile, and followed him out. When the door closed, I finally allowed myself a quiet laugh, not from humor, but from clarity. Henry would have loved this scene. He used to say life's tests never end. Evie, they just change the subject. I looked down at the damp table where faint traces of ink still spelled out the words, "Power of Attorney." Under the afternoon light, they looked like ghosts, fading, irrelevant, powerless. I wiped the table clean and whispered, "Nice try, Jacob." Then I poured myself a fresh cup of tea, stroked Winston's fur, and glanced at the clock. The steady tick-tock sounded almost like applause. The winter sky hung low over the rooftops as Evelyn parked her car in front of Patriot Pawn. The neon sign flickered just as it had the first time she came here, humming faintly like it knew what she carried in her purse. Henry's watch wrapped in the same handkerchief she'd used the day of his funeral. Inside, Leo Ramirez looked up from behind the counter, wiping his hands on a rag. His expression shifted from curiosity to recognition. "Well, if it isn't Mrs. Carter," he said, grinning. "You here to sell me the cat next? Or maybe that smile, I'll give you a fair price." Evelyn shook her head, her tone warm but serious. "Leo, I need your help. Again." The grin faded. "That kind of help." She nodded. "I think there's something else inside the watch. Something Henry left." Leo frowned. "We already found the compartment, remember?" Apparently, she said softly, "There's another." A few minutes later, Franklin Shaw pushed through the shop door, his coat flapping against the wind. His white hair was tousled, his wire-frame glasses fogged. "Evelyn," he said, slightly out of breath. "You said it was urgent. What's this about?" She placed the Rolex on the counter with reverence. Henry hid something more. "I can feel it." Franklin exchanged a skeptical glance with Leo. Hidden compartments in watches aren't exactly common, unless your husband moonlighted as a spy. Leo shrugged. "Hey, I once found a marriage proposal ring inside a wristwatch. Guy was going to pop the question, but he pawned it instead. Romance and bankruptcy, my two favorite clients." Evelyn smiled faintly despite the tension. "Please, just open it." Leo grabbed his jeweler's tools while Franklin set up a magnifier lamp. The tiny click of metal against metal filled the room, a delicate symphony of patience and precision. "There," Leo murmured after a few minutes, tapping the back plate with his screwdriver. "There's a ridge here. It's not standard." He gave it a twist, and with a soft snap, the back plate popped off. Beneath the old mechanism was a micro SD card smaller than a fingernail tucked neatly under a false panel. Leo let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned." Evelyn covered her mouth. Her voice trembled. He really did it. Franklin reached for the card with trembling fingers. "We'll need a reader. My laptop doesn't even have a port that small." Leo grinned, disappearing into the back room. "Lucky for you, I keep every piece of junk technology since the Clinton administration." He returned with an ancient black laptop, its keys shiny from use, one of them missing the letter N. "Here," he said proudly, "she's slow, but she's loyal." "Like me," Franklin muttered. "Like my cat," Leo countered, "except she bites less." Evelyn's heart pounded as Leo slotted the card in. The old computer wheezed and hummed to life. A folder popped up automatically. "Video log HC or 1." Leo looked up. "Want me to hit play?" Evelyn nodded. The screen flickered, then steadied on Henry's face, pale thinner than she remembered sitting in his workshop surrounded by blueprints and coffee mugs. His voice filled the room low and steady. "Eve," he began, "if you're watching this, it means I'm gone and things have turned out exactly how I feared." Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. Tears blurred the screen, but she didn't look away. Henry continued, "Our son, Jacob, he's not the boy we raised anymore. I don't know what changed, greed, desperation, or someone whispering in his ear, but he's been digging, asking lawyers how to get control of your accounts, calling about guardianship petitions. He's planning to have you declared unfit, Eve." Franklin's eyes widened. "Jesus Christ." Henry leaned closer to the camera. "I couldn't stop him without proof, so I gathered it. Every word, every call, every meeting he had with that wife of his. It's all here." The image cut abruptly to another video grainier shot from a hidden camera. Jacob's voice was unmistakable. "Jacob wants mom's declared incompetent. The rest is easy. Power of attorney liquidation done. Brittany." "You're sure the bank won't question it, Jacob?" "Not if she's in a care facility. She's old confused. They'll sign off on anything." Brittany laughing softly. "Then maybe she's due for a little breakdown." The words hit Evelyn like a physical blow. She clutched the edge of the counter. Franklin muttered under his breath, "That bastard." Henry's voice returned, calm but resolute. "Eve, if you're hearing this, you know what to do. Don't confront him directly. Don't trust anyone who says they're acting in your best interest. Hand this evidence to someone you do trust, someone who won't flinch at the truth." For a moment, the video showed Henry looking down as though searching for the right words. Then he smiled faintly. "And if Leo Ramirez is still alive and running that dusty pawn shop, tell him his coffee still tastes like motor oil." Leo blinked. "Wait, he what?" Henry's voice grew soft. "Take care of her, Leo. She'll need someone stubborn on her side." The screen froze, then black. No one spoke for a long time. The hum of the old computer filled the silence. Evelyn's throat tightened. He knew everything, even this. Franklin rubbed his temples. "Evelyn, this video, it's not just proof. It's evidence of intent, conspiracy, elder abuse. We need to secure it." Leo nodded solemnly. "We can make copies. I'll put one in my safe and another in an encrypted drive. No one's touching this without your permission." Then, as if the tension needed release, Leo added with a crooked grin, "You know I gotta hand it to your husband. Man hides secret codes in Rolex watches, records his traitorous kid, leaves clues like some 80s spy movie, and still has time to roast my coffee recipe." Evelyn laughed through her tears, a broken, relieved laugh that filled the room. "He always said he'd find a way to make me smile even from the grave." Franklin placed a hand on her shoulder. "Evelyn, Henry didn't just protect you. He armed you. This changes everything." Evelyn looked at the frozen frame of Henry's face on the screen, the faint smile, the quiet courage. She whispered, Then it's time I start fighting back." Leo saluted with his coffee mug. "That's the spirit, Mrs. Carter. But, maybe we make the next battle plan after I brew a fresh pot? This one tastes like regret." Evelyn chuckled, wiping her eyes. "Then make it strong. We'll need it." As the kettle hissed and the computer whirred, the three of them stood together in that dim pawn shop, an unlikely alliance forged from betrayal, loyalty, and a dead man's final love letter. Outside, snow began to fall. Inside, for the first time in months, Evelyn felt something stirring inside her chest again. Not grief, resolve. The snow outside Patriot Pawn had turned to slush by the time Evelyn stepped inside, clutching her gloves like they were armor. Leo and Franklin were already waiting, one armed with coffee, the other with a sense of purpose. The air buzzed with quiet tension. The video from the hidden SD card had changed everything. Jacob wasn't just a greedy son. He was part of something larger, darker, the kind of mess Henry must have foreseen years ago. Evelyn took a slow breath. "If Henry left me proof, then it's time we use it." Leo crossed his arms. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" "That depends," she said. "Are you thinking of bait?" He grinned. "Now we're talking." That afternoon, the plan came together in Leo's cramped back office, a space that smelled faintly of solder and stale popcorn. Franklin typed furiously at the old laptop while Leo snapped photos of the Rolex under perfect lighting. Evelyn stood by, uneasy but resolute. "We'll post it under an anonymous listing," Franklin explained. "No identifying info, just 1978 Rolex Submariner, private sale, cash only, pick up in person." That should draw him out. Leo leaned over, tapping the screen. "Add this line, watch recently verified as authentic found with original documentation." It'll make him sweat. Evelyn managed a grim smile. Henry would have enjoyed this. Within an hour, the ad was live. They didn't have to wait long. By evening, Leo's phone buzzed. He glanced at the message and whistled low. Got a bite. Username Midwest Collector. Wants to buy in cash. No negotiation. Franklin looked up from his coffee. That's him. Jacob never negotiates when he thinks he's stealing something. Evelyn's heartbeat quickened. When tomorrow morning, Leo said, "He's coming here at 10. The next day dawned gray and heavy. Evelyn arrived early, dressed in her late husband's old coat. The familiar scent of leather and faint cologne grounded her. She tucked Henry's letter into her pocket, a talisman for courage. Leo double-checked the locks and tested the small camera he'd set up near the counter. Just in case, he said, "Always nice to have a front-row seat when karma clocks in." Franklin had volunteered to stay nearby, parked across the street in his beat-up Ford, with his phone connected to Special Agent Lisa Howard, the federal investigator Henry had once quietly cooperated with. At 9:55, the bell over the pawnshop door jingled. Jacob Carter stepped inside. He looked worse than she remembered, soot-wrinkled eyes, bloodshot, the smell of stress clinging to him. He scanned the shelves, oblivious to the woman standing quietly behind the curtain in the back room. Mr. Carter Leo greeted, feigning cheerfulness. "You here for the Submariner?" Jacob nodded briskly. "Cash." He tossed an envelope on the counter. "Where is it?" Leo lifted the watch from a velvet box and set it gently on the counter. "Beautiful piece, isn't it?" he said. "Almost like it's got history." Jacob's fingers twitched. "I'll take it." "Funny," Leo said, leaning casually on the counter. "You don't even want to ask where it came from. I don't care. A sale's a sale." From behind the curtain, Evelyn's voice cut through the room. "Then maybe you should have cared the first time you sold it." Jacob froze. His head turned slowly, disbelief, hardening into shock as Evelyn stepped out from the shadows. "Mom," he stammered. What are you doing here?" Evelyn's tone was calm, almost gentle. "Watching you make the same mistake twice." His eyes darted between her and Leo. "You set me up." She met his gaze without blinking. "You set yourself up the moment you pawned your father's memory for a vacation." Jacob's hand twitched toward the envelope. "I don't know what this is about, but I'm leaving." Leo shifted his stance, blocking the door. Afraid you can't, buddy. Shop policy no running when you've got guilt in your pockets. Move, Jacob snapped. Leo crossed his arms. Make me. Jacob tried to shove past him, but Leo was built like a brick wall. The scuffle lasted seconds, a flash of motion, the clatter of a fallen chair, the thud of boots on wood. Then Leo grabbed the handle, swung it shut, and turned the deadbolt with a satisfying click. Jacob spun around, breathing hard. You think this is funny? Evelyn's voice stayed steady. No, I think it's tragic. She took out her phone and pressed speed dial. Agent Howard. He's here. Within moments, a clear, commanding voice echoed through the speaker. This is Special Agent Lisa Howard, FBI. Mrs. Carter, are you in a secure location? Yes. Evelyn said, her eyes locked on her son. At Patriot Pawn, my son Jacob Carter is attempting to recover property connected to an ongoing money laundering investigation. Jacob's face drained of color. You called the FBI. Lisa's voice came crisp over the line. Ma'am, stay calm. Units are en route. Do not let him leave. Jacob laughed bitterly. You're bluffing. There's no investigation. Leo raised an eyebrow. Tell that to the nice lady with the badge. Through the speaker, Lisa continued, Mr. Carter, we've been tracing funds transferred through Arrow Ridge Bank under your company's name. You might want to stop talking. The line crackled, and then came the words that made Evelyn's chest tighten. I think, Mrs. Carter, you just helped us bring down an entire laundering network. Jacob's defiance faltered. He looked at Evelyn, the woman he'd once dismissed as naive, and for the first time there was something like fear in his eyes. Mom, he said quietly, you don't understand. This isn't just me. There are people I understand perfectly, she interrupted. Your father warned me. Jacob blinked. Dad, what are you talking about? He knew what you were doing. He recorded everything, every plan, every word. Leo, arms folded, added dryly, including the part where you call your mom a liability. Real touching. Jacob's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Leo nodded toward the window. Sounds like your ride's here. Minutes later, 2 unmarked SUVs pulled up to the curb. Agent Lisa Howard, tall and composed in a dark coat, stepped out, flashing her badge. Her team entered swiftly, securing the scene with quiet efficiency. Jacob's shoulders slumped as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. He didn't resist. Lisa gave Evelyn a brief nod. You did the right thing, Mrs. Carter. This ties directly to a federal case. Henry's files, they've helped us trace a dozen shell accounts. Evelyn managed a faint smile. He always did believe in accountability. Leo muttered, That's one way to say revenge with receipts. Lisa allowed herself a small grin. You'd be surprised how often justice starts in a pawn shop. As Jacob was led outside, he turned once more toward his mother. I never meant to hurt you, he said softly. Evelyn's eyes glistened, but her voice stayed firm. Intentions don't erase consequences, Jacob. I hope you remember that for once. He said nothing as they placed him in the car. When the SUVs drove away, silence fell over the shop again. Leo exhaled and leaned on the counter. Well, he said that went better than most of my mornings. Evelyn chuckled, weary but relieved. You make a surprisingly good accomplice, Leo. He grinned. I prefer the term accessory to justice. She smiled, glancing at the watch lying on the counter, its ticking steady and alive. Henry, she whispered, we're almost done. Outside, snow began to fall, again soft, quiet, and cleansing. The next morning broke cold and brittle, the kind of dawn that made everything look sharper than it really was. Frost clung to the glass, like lace. Evelyn stood by her window, the Rolex warm in her hand, ticking softly, the only sound in a house finally at peace. Outside, a line of black SUVs rolled into the quiet suburban street. The rhythmic crunch of boots on snow shattered the silence. Doors slammed, radios crackled. Then came the pounding on Jacob's front door. FBI, open up. Evelyn stepped onto her porch, the morning air biting her cheeks. Across the street, she saw her son's silhouette appear in the window, frantic, confused, still in the sweatshirt he'd probably slept in. Moments later, the door burst open. Agents swarmed in, shouts echoed. Inside, Jacob stumbled backward, hands raised, face pale. "This is insane. I didn't do anything. It was just investment money," Special Agent Lisa Howard. Her badge gleaming in the winter light stepped forward, her tone calm but cutting. "No, Mr. Carter. This is evidence of money laundering, tax fraud, and elder financial abuse." Her words cut through the air like a verdict. From her porch, Evelyn didn't flinch. She stood straight, the Rolex still in her palm, its golden face catching the sunrise. The watch ticked in perfect rhythm with the agent's commands. Neighbors began to gather, whispering behind gloved hands. "Is that Evelyn Carter?" one murmured. "The same one who fought the school board in 98 figures." Another chuckled softly. "Evelyn wins again." Their voices faded into the background as Evelyn watched her son being led outside. Jacob's eyes locked onto hers, a mix of disbelief and desperation. "Mom, please, you have to tell them this isn't what it looks like. It was just a deal, just money moving around." Evelyn's voice was quiet but steady. "You moved more than money, Jacob. You moved every line you swore you'd never cross." He shook his head wildly as the agents cuffed him. "You think Dad would have wanted this?" She met his gaze. "No. He wanted you to be better." Lisa approached Evelyn with a respectful nod. "We'll finish processing everything at headquarters. Mrs. Carter, I want you to know your evidence was crucial. Henry's recordings and your call yesterday cracked the entire network. You didn't just stop your son, you stopped a ring." Evelyn gave a faint smile. "He always did have a plan." Lisa returned it. "And you finished it." As the SUVs pulled away, the neighborhood slowly exhaled. The quiet returned, broken only by the muffled hum of gossip. "Poor woman," one neighbor whispered. "Still, she handled it better than most." Another replied, "Handled." She commanded it. Evelyn turned and went back inside. The moment the door clicked shut, the warmth enveloped her. The scent of chamomile still lingered from the night before. She set the Rolex on the kitchen table. The morning light streamed through the window, landing on the golden dial. For a moment it looked almost alive, glowing, breathing, timeless. She traced her fingers along the edge of the glass. "You did it, Henry," she whispered. "You kept your promise." Her reflection shimmered faintly on the metal surface, older, yes, but unbroken. She sat down, letting the ticking of the watch fill the silence. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a reminder of time survived, of love, protected, of justice earned quietly and completely. Outside, the world went on. Dogs barked, cars started, life resumed. Inside, Evelyn finally allowed herself a long breath. The fight was over. The clock on the wall chimed once, twice. Then the Rolex answered back, steady, perfect, alive. And Evelyn, for the first time in a long while, smiled without sorrow. 3 months later, spring returned to Bloomington, quiet, shy, but insistent. The frost had retreated, and the city park bloomed again with tulips Henry once loved. Evelyn stood at the entrance of the brand-new Henry Carter Community Center, watching the sunlight glint off the polished brass plaque that bore his name, dedicated to Henry Carter, who believed every moment was worth saving. The hum of conversation surrounded her children, chasing balloons, volunteers setting up tables, local reporters snapping photos. The center had been funded entirely by the trust Henry left money once hidden behind encrypted codes, now transformed into a place of hope. Leo appeared beside her holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "Careful," he said, handing one over. "It's not my usual motor oil blend. Thought I'd try something human." Evelyn laughed, the sound light and genuine. "So miracles do happen." He smiled. "You did this, you know. From heartbreak to a community center, not a bad retirement project." Evelyn looked out at the crowd, the laughter, the banners, the ripple of new beginnings. "No," she said softly. "Henry did this. I just followed the breadcrumbs." Leo tilted his head, watching her closely. "You ever think maybe he left them knowing you'd finish the trail?" She turned to him with that familiar half-smile, the one that carried equal parts wisdom and ache. "Leo, you know what I've learned? Life pays interest slowly, but it always pays in full. He chuckled. Now that sounds like the math teacher I remember. The ribbon-cutting ceremony began. Franklin stood near the podium giving his speech with a proud tremor in his voice. Henry Carter wasn't just an investor or a teacher. He was a man who understood legacy, not the kind written on paper, but the kind built in people. Applause rose. Evelyn listened quietly, her hand brushing over the old Rolex on her wrist. The watch ticked steadily beneath her skin, a heartbeat, borrowed from the past. She caught a glimpse of movement across the courtyard. A familiar figure, head-down orange vest, glinting in the sunlight. Brittany. The woman was sweeping near the edge of the playground court-mandated community service for her role in Jacob's fraud. Her posture was smaller now, her hair tied back her manicured hands, clutching a broom instead of a designer purse. Evelyn walked over slowly. The sound of the broom scraping concrete filled the silence between them. Brittany finally looked up, eyes wide and wary. "Mrs. Carter," she murmured, voice hoarse. "I didn't expect to see you here." Evelyn regarded her for a long moment. There was no anger left, just a quiet clarity that only time could carve. Some lessons, Evelyn said, gently cost a Rolex. Brittany lowered her gaze. Evelyn continued, her voice steady as stone. "Some cost your dignity." The younger woman said nothing. The wind carried away whatever apology she might have whispered. Evelyn turned and walked back toward the crowd, the sound of the broom fading behind her. Inside the community center, the walls were lined with photographs, Henry teaching, laughing, tinkering with a clock mechanism, his hands always steady, always patient. A display case held the original Rolex, now restored, protected under glass. A small plaque read, "Every second he gave was love made visible." Evelyn stood before it, smiling faintly. Leo joined her, tucking his hands into his pockets. "You sure you want it locked up here?" he asked. "Could fetch a small fortune on the collector's market." She glanced at him. "Some things belong to time now." He nodded, quiet for once. That evening, the guests drifted away and the laughter faded. The lights in the hall dimmed until only the soft glow from the window remained. Evelyn sat by the large front window overlooking the street. In her lap rested Henry's other watch, the one she still wore, ticking faithfully. Outside, the moon rose over the new community center sign. The air smelled of spring rain and fresh paint. She closed her eyes, letting the steady rhythm of the Rolex fill the silence. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Her voice, calm, reflective, filled the space like a memory being spoken into the air. The greatest love stories aren't about romance. They're about protection, about someone loving you enough to fight battles you never saw coming. And sometimes, time itself fights for you. She looked down at the Rolex, its face gleaming like captured sunlight. For a heartbeat, it felt as if Henry was sitting beside her again, his laughter soft, his hand warm over hers. The second hand reached the top of the dial. Tick, then silence. If this story touched you, take a moment before you go. Because sometimes the quietest victories, like Evelyn's, aren't about revenge or punishment. They're about peace. About knowing you stood your ground when it mattered most. Henry's watch stopped ticking, but his love didn't. It kept time in every choice Evelyn made, proof that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. If you've ever fought quietly for your dignity or rebuilt your life after betrayal, I'd love to hear your story too. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, your city, your country, your journey. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story so more people can find strength in it. Because love, like time, remembers everything.